evening, a good Vach Shavua Tov, a good week to you, my holy sisters and brothers. Our minds, our hearts are turned toward Israel that is under attack, or was under attack. It seems to have paused, but hundreds of rockets launched, not from Iran's usual proxy launch sites, right on the borders of Israel, but from Iran itself. So perhaps these dirtbags who run that country are taking the mask off and actually not working through their little puppets around Israel, but launching the attacks in a more brazen manner. And thank God it seems that Iron Dome, both on Israel's part and its partners in the area, of course, including the United States, thank God, intercepted all the rockets. I mean, we've just come out of Shabbos, and I've only heard, some of the news, but it looks like they really stopped the vast majority of it, if not all of it. So I don't know where this is headed. It's not good. But thank God that as far as at least what I have heard at this point, the rockets were ineffective. And please God, please God, watch over our brothers and sisters in the Holy Land. End this conflict with a secure and lasting peace for Eretz Yisrael and Am Yisrael. Just please God, may we hear good news. We dedicate our learning tonight to that. May we hear good news from the Holy Land, and we say Amen. Let's light up the darkness. Because I'll tell you, my brothers and sisters, this is what we can do right now. When we do Torah mitzvahs, that adds to the security of Israel, the security of the Jewish people everywhere, and peace throughout the world. Why are these Iranian totalitarian dirtbags that run that country and oppress their people? Really, the Iranian people, wonderful people, amazing people in Iran. Why is this government that oppresses them so obsessed with Israel and bringing death to Israel, launching death on Israel? God knows. God knows. All right, let's do our part to secure peace throughout the world by learning Torah. The more Torah is learned, the more peace there is in the world. Okay, we are going to conclude, God willing. Oh no, let me see who's in the house. Bill in mid-Missouri, Sharon in New Jersey, Bella in Florida, Stephen in New Hampshire, Guy in Ohio, Penelope in Anaheim, Ilanit in Silver Spring, Marie in Freeport. Welcome, everybody. Okay, tonight, God willing, we're going to conclude chapter 3 here in Bava Metzia, the 22nd volume of the Talmud. We're picking this up toward the bottom of page 43b, Mishna number 10, completing our discussion of that, in which we learned in Mishnah number 10 the concept that when one is a bailee, one was entrusted to safeguard a deposit that someone left with him, and the bailee decided to misappropriate it for himself. So he's going to be liable for that. But let's say that the value of the property changed from the time that it was deposited with the bailee, and perhaps its value went up or down, to the time when it was misappropriated, and then its value changed some more in one direction or the other until the time that a claim was brought by the owner of the property against the bailee. So for which value is the bailee who misappropriated the property responsible? So we pick this up. The Mishnah said that Rabbi Akiva says, and this was a minority opinion, he pays in accordance with its value at the time of the claim. So when the claim is brought by the owner of the property in the Beis Din, in the rabbinic court. So Rabbi Yehuda says that Shmuel says the law is in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Akiva. And Rabbi Akiva concedes in a case where there are witnesses to the misappropriation, as in that case, the payment is calculated in accordance with the value of the deposit at the time of the misappropriation. And this is akin to robbery, right? And so if a robber has to make good on what he stole, when is the value assessed? At the time that he stole it. And what is the reason for that law? It is, as the verse states, concerning, among others, one who misappropriates a deposit, which the Torah mentions specifically, Leviticus 5:24, to whom it appertains shall he give it on the day of his being guilty. Right? So this seems to be when the claim is brought and the judges decide. That's why Rabbi Akiva is ruling this way. And in this case, since there are witnesses to the robbery, from that moment he is liable to pay him for his guilt. He is rendered guilty at the moment the witnesses saw him misappropriate the deposit. Right? So he's using the law, which seems to say on the day he is found guilty, which would seem to indicate when the claim is brought. But he's saying, no, the day he's found guilty is when witnesses saw him misappropriate. Now, usually when there's a bailee who's safeguarding property, they're not witnesses to see that he's keeping for himself that which was entrusted to him to safeguard. But if there are witnesses, then according to this sugya, this teaching in the Gemara, Rabbi Akiva would concede that he's going to be liable to pay its value as of the day he took it in front of witnesses. Now, Rav Oshaya said to Rav Yehuda, my teacher, is that what you say? This is what Rabbi Asi says that Rabbi Yochanan says. Rabbi Akiva was in disagreement even in a case where there are witnesses to the misappropriation. And what is the reason for that, halacha? It is as the verse states, to whom it appertains shall he give it on the day of his being guilty. And it is the court and not the witnesses that renders him liable to pay him, the owner, for his guilt. So Rabbi Zeir said to Rabbi Abba Bar Papa, when you go there to Eretz Yisrael, to the land of Israel, take the detour and go by the ladder of Tyre, Tyre, and enter before Rabbi Yaakov Bar Idi. So, in other words, don't take the overland route that goes in a more direct manner to where the sages are in Tiberia, but rather go around sort of through Syria and Lebanon and come down the coast so that you will have an opportunity to speak with Rabbi Yaakov Bar Idi and ask of him if he heard whether, according to Rabbi Yochanan, the law is in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Akiva, or whether the law is not in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Akiva. So he went and asked, and Rabbi Yaakov Bar Idi said to him, this is what Rabbi Yochanan says. The law is always in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Akiva. Hold on to that thought. And the Gemara asks, what is the meaning of always? And Rav Ashi said, Rabbi Yochanan used this term so that you will not say the following. This statement that the law is in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Akiva applies specifically in a case where there are no witnesses. But in a case where there are witnesses, no, payment is calculated in accordance with the value of the deposit when they witness the appropriation. So you shouldn't think that and say that, no, Rabbi Akiva says it's always at the time of the claim. Or alternatively, the law will not be in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Akiva in a case where he returns the barrel to its place and it broke. He took it, but he returned it, and then it broke. And as we saw, is it considered that you returned something that you stole if the owner never knows that you returned it? And the law came out, no, you have to let the owner know that you took it, or you're still liable for any damage that happens after the time that you took it, even if you returned it before it broke. So Rabbi Yochanan stated that the law is always in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Akiva, to exclude the opinion of Rabbi Yishmael, who says that if one stole from another and returned it, we do not require the knowledge of the owners for the item to be considered returned, and therefore the increased liability for any extra damage would be severed. Rabbi Yochanan teaches us that the law is that we require the knowledge of the owners in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Akiva. Now that we do follow Rabbi Akiva, that an item is not considered returned and the enhanced liability, brought back to where it was unless the owners know about it. We do follow Akiva in that. But with regard to one who misappropriates property for himself, and which value do we assess for him to make it good? And Rava says, contrary to the opinion of Rabbi Yochanan, the law is in accordance with the opinion of Beis Hillel, which is at the time that he misappropriates, whether there were witnesses or not. That's the value that the robber and, in this case, the bailee have to make good on. And we do not follow Rabbi Akiva in that regard. And that concludes our discussion of Mishnah number 10 here in chapter 3. With regard to, and here's now Mishnah 11, the final Mishnah of this chapter, and it's a short Mishnah and Gemara. With regard to one who intends to misappropriate a deposit, and he voices that intent in the presence of witnesses. So he says, I'm going to keep this for myself. He says that. Now, he hasn't done it yet, but he says he will. So Beis Shammai say, the school of Shammai, he is liable to pay for any damage to the deposit from that point forward. And Beis Hillel say, and we follow Beis Hillel, he is liable to pay only if he actually misappropriates the deposit, as it is stated concerning a bailee, Exodus 22:7, whether he has misappropriated his neighbor's goods, not whether he has voiced an intent to misappropriate, but in other words, the law of the bailee who misappropriates a deposit only mentions the action, not intent to do the action. So it's only when he's actually done it, not when he formulates an intent in his head or even by his words. So the Mishnah continues, if he tilted the deposited barrel, right? There's a barrel in his storehouse that he was asked to take care of. And as we've seen, what does it mean to misappropriate? Is it just he designates in his head, you know what, I'm going to keep this. I'm not going to give it back to the guy at the end of his period of depositing it here? Or is it that he uses it for his own purposes, whether to stand on it to fetch some birds, or he needs the space in the warehouse, or he pours wine out of it? There's a lot of different actions that may or may not constitute misappropriating. So here, if he tilted the deposited barrel and he took from it a quarter lug of wine for his own use, so he took some wine out of the barrel. Did he misappropriate the whole barrel? Well, he tilted it just to take a quarter lug of wine. So it's about a pint. And the barrel then broke. But he pays only for the quarter lug that he took. If he lifted the barrel and took from it a quarter lug of wine and the barrel broke, since he acquired the barrel by lifting it, he pays the value of the entire barrel. And that's the Mishnah. And it's not a coincidence that that's the final Mishnah of this chapter, because when we, in a few minutes, move into chapter 4, it's going to be all about when is it considered that somebody has acquired an object, so that there's been a transfer of possession and resulting change in legal status, etc. So here, that he took some wine from the barrel. Now, if it just broke while it was in his possession, he's not necessarily liable as long as he didn't do something negligent. But if he lifted the barrel and then it broke, he's going to be liable for the whole barrel worth of wine, because when he lifted it, he acquired it for himself. Now, we're on 44a. The Gemara. From where are these matters derived that one is liable to pay for intent to misappropriate a deposit? It is as the sage, according to Beis Shammai, it is as the sages taught. It is written with regard to misappropriation. For every matter of dinar, trespass, right? So Beis Shammai said that the term dinar, which literally means word, teaches that one is liable to pay for a thought of misappropriation just as he is for an action. One pays for a matter of trespass even if there is no actual trespass. And Beis Hillel say he is liable to pay only if he actually misappropriates the deposit, as it is stated, whether he has misappropriated his neighbor's goods in Exodus 22:7. And Beis Shammai said to Beis Hillel, but isn't it already stated for every matter of trespass? And Beis Hillel said to Beis Shammai, but isn't it already stated whether he has misappropriated his neighbor's goods? Misappropriated, not intended to misappropriate. If so, what is the meaning when the verse states, for every matter of trespass, one might have thought I've derived only that one is liable to pay if he misappropriated the deposit himself. But if he said to his slave or to his agent to misappropriate the deposit in his possession, from where is it derived that he is liable to pay due to their actions? And the verse states, for every matter of trespass, from which it is derived that one's speech renders him liable to pay for any misappropriation. And that's not surprising. I mean, if this is a guy who has a big storehouse and somebody else has deposited some jugs of wine in that storehouse, please watch it for me, or I'm paying you to watch it for me. Now, does the guy have to go and actually lift the jugs in order to perform the act of misappropriation? What if he sends his slave or his minor son to do it for him? Now, we've talked earlier that there's no agency for transgression. But did the slave or the minor son or the adult son know that he was committing a transgression when his father said to him, go lift those jugs, or go bring a jug, bring the red one? The one who was sent is acting as the agent of the owner, and he didn't know that he was committing a transgression. He just thought he was sent to fetch a jug, and he didn't know who owns those jugs, and he assumed that if his father told him to bring it, that it was one that he was permitted to bring. So he's definitely acting as an agent of his father. Now you could say, well, what did the father actually do? He only spoke words. He didn't lift it himself, but he caused it to be lifted with his words. So even according to Beis Hillel, that would be the act of misappropriation. Whereas Beis Shammai would say, even if he said, you know what, I'm going to keep that barrel for myself, he's already done it. And Beis Hillel would disagree. The Mishnah teaches, if he tilted the deposited barrel, he is liable to pay only for the wine that he took. And Rabbah says the sages taught this law only if the barrel broke. But if the wine in the barrel fermented and spoiled, he pays for the entire barrel. And what is the reason for this ruling? He is liable because it was his arrows, meaning his actions, that were effective in spoiling the wine. Although he only took a quarter log, and he did it in such a way as to not by his action acquire the barrel, nevertheless, when he opened a sealed barrel of wine to take that bit for himself, he let in the air that ended up spoiling the wine. So yeah, of course, he's liable for the loss when that barrel of wine goes bad. And the Mishnah teaches, if one lifted the barrel and took from it a quarter log of wine, he pays the value of the entire barrel. And Shmuel says, when the Tana said, and took from it, it is not that he actually took the wine from the barrel. Rather, once he lifted it in order to take wine from it, even if he did not yet take wine from it, if it breaks, he is liable to pay, because by lifting the barrel, he performed an act of acquisition on it. And the Gemara asks, shall we say that Shmuel holds that misappropriation does not require loss? And the sages say, no, do not draw that conclusion. It is different here, since it is preferable for the bailee that all the wine in this barrel will serve as a base for that quarter log. In other words, although his intent was to take a small amount of wine, since that small amount is better preserved within the full barrel of wine, it is as though he took the entire barrel. Excuse me. And Rav Ashi raises a dilemma based on that explanation. If one lifts a purse in order to take from it a single dinar, what is the law? Is it only with regard to wine, which is preserved only by means of the wine in the barrel, that if one intends to take a quarter log, it is as though he intended to take all the wine in the barrel? But with regard to a dinar, which is preserved even by itself, doesn't have to be surrounded by other coins, intent to take one dinar does not indicate intent to take all the coins in the purse, right? When he lifts a purse with his intention is just to take one coin out of it, do we say that since he lifted the purse, it's as though he stole all of the purse? Because we just said that with wine, if he lifts the barrel, even though his intent is only to remove a little bit of the wine, it's as if he misappropriated the entire barrel. Are we going to say that it's different in the case of the barrel because when you take even a little bit of wine, you immediately introduce the risk that the whole barrel will go bad, but that doesn't apply in the case of the purse? Or perhaps safeguarding a purse is different from safeguarding a dinar. A single coin is easily lost, whereas a purse is not, as it is more easily safeguarded. Therefore, when the bailee intends to take 1 dinar, he intends to take all of the coins in the purse. And the Gemara concludes, taiku. That dilemma was never resolved, so we are not sure if when one lifts a wallet just to remove a dollar bill, do we ascribe to that person intent to take the whole wallet or not if something goes wrong and the wallet is lost, right? Let's say he lifts a wallet and he just intended to take $1, but in lifting the wallet, he dropped it and it went down the sewer. Are we going to say that he's liable for the loss of the whole wallet? Yeah, probably we will, right? And that concludes our discussion of chapter 3. Now we open chapter 4, where we're going to be getting a little bit more into the details of when people perform a transaction, when exactly is that transaction considered to have become effective. And what's important to understand here is that money, generally speaking, is considered a different kind of, I don't want to say commodity, because sometimes money is a commodity and sometimes it's not. But let's just say it's a different substance than whatever it is traded for, right? So let's say we're in a barter economy or we're neighbors, and I say to you, hey, you know what? My wife baked these amazing loaves of bread, and I noticed, that you shechted a really prime calf. So I'll trade you 10 loaves of bread for 10 pounds of beef, right? Whatever. Let's just say in that time and place, that's the appropriate exchange. And so when, and let's say I give you the bread before you give me the meat. So at the time that you take, I hand you the bread and you take the bread from me. Is the deal done? Or can one of us renege the deal since the beef hasn't already changed hands? Now that's going to be a different question than when money is traded, right? Normally the way we acquire 10 pounds of beef or 10 loaves of bread is that we pay money for it. But money, as we'll see, has a different categorization than other movable goods that are exchanged for other movable goods. Okay, page 44a, and we open Mishnah number 1 here in chapter 4. And Rav Steinsaltz gives us a little explanation at the top of the Mishnah. There is a halachic, a Jewish legal principle, that when one purchases an item, the payment of the money does not affect the transaction. The transaction is effected only by means of the buyer's physically taking the item into his possession. For example, by pulling the item. Payment of money by the buyer creates only a moral obligation for the seller to sell him the item. Right? When the money is handed over, the deal has not closed. You could undo the deal even though the money has changed hands. It's only when the item that's being purchased for the money, when that has changed hands, that the deal has been effected. However, this, as we'll see, where it says that, but if the seller takes the money, right, and then tries to unwind the deal, maybe because somebody else offered him a higher price, if he unwinds the deal after taking the money, the sages say a curse on him, right? So legally he can get out of it, but morally repugnant to unwind a deal at that point. Okay. So when two types of currency, now this is where it gets very interesting. So money has a different status than other movable objects. But what happens when you're trading money for money? And when does that happen? It happens all the time. Sometimes you need change, right? You want to break dollar bills into coins. Or sometimes you travel to another country and you're going to change, US dollars for euros. So that's a situation where you're buying currency with other currency. So when two types of currency are exchanged for each other, one of the types will have the status of the money being paid, and the other type of currency will have the status of the item being purchased. And so they have to fall into these two roles, even though money's being traded for money. So handing over the former will not affect the transaction, right? You don't affect the transaction when you're talking about when the money changes hands, but you affect the transaction when the thing being purchased changes hands. So when you're changing currency for currency, which do we say is the currency that's being purchased, and which do we say is the currency that's used as money to purchase? So handing over the money will not affect the transaction, while handing over the thing purchased does. And the Mishnah teaches, when one purchases gold coins, paying with silver coins, the gold coins assume the status of the purchased item, and the silver coins assume the status of money. Therefore, when one party takes possession of the gold coins, the other party acquires the silver coins. But when one party takes possession of the silver coins, the other party does not acquire the gold coins. So interesting, even if the gold coins go first, the deal is done. But when the silver coin, but the deal is not done until the gold coins change hands. So when the silver coins change hands, the deal is not done, because we say that silver is the money and gold is the thing purchased. Now here's where it gets very interesting. In an exchange of silver coins for copper coins. Now we just learned that if you're buying gold coins, we say that the silver is the money and the gold is the thing purchased. So you might think, okay, well, if you're trading silver coins for copper coins, it must seem like the silver is what's being purchased and the copper is being used as the money. So when the silver changes hands, that is when the deal is done. But when the copper changes hands, the deal is not done yet, not until the silver changes hands. You might think that. I would have thought that. I was wrong. In an exchange of silver coins for copper coins, when one party takes possession of the copper coins, the other party acquires the silver coins. But when one party takes possession of the silver coins, the other party does not acquire the copper coins. And this is because the copper is considered the commodity, the thing purchased, and the silver is still considered the money, just as it was when gold coins were being purchased. In an exchange of flawed coins for unflawed coins, when one party takes possession of the flawed coins, the other party acquires the unflawed coins, meaning unflawed coins are the money, flawed coins are the commodity. But when one party takes possession of the unflawed coins, the other party does not acquire the flawed coins. Wait. Yeah, right. Exactly. The unflawed coins are the money, the flawed coins are the commodity. In an exchange of an unminted coin for a minted coin, when one party takes possession of an unminted coin, the other party acquires the minted coin, meaning the unminted coins are the commodity and the minted coins are the money. But when one party takes possession of a minted coin, the other party does not acquire the unminted coin. In an exchange of a coin for movable property, when one party takes possession of the movable property, the other party acquires the coin. But when one party takes possession of the coin, the other party does not acquire the movable property. Clearly, the coin is the money and the movable property is the commodity. And this is the principle with regard to those who exchange all forms of movable property. Each acquires the property of the other, i.e., the moment that one of the parties to the exchange takes possession of the item that he is acquiring, for example, by means of pulling, the other party acquires the item from the first party, right? So if it's bread for meat, it sounds like as soon as one party acquires from the other, then the exchange is effected. The other party now has to deliver. And how so? If the buyer pulled produce from the seller, but the buyer did not yet give the seller their value in money, he cannot renege on the transaction. But if the buyer gave the seller money, but did not yet pull produce from him, he can renege on the transaction, as the transaction is not yet complete. But with regard to this latter case, the sages said, he who exacted payment from the people of the generation of the flood and from the generation of the dispersion, right? So the people that died in the flood of Noah's Ark, and the people of the dispersion, meaning the people who dispersed after the Tower of Babel. So the one who exacted payment from them, obviously that's God. God will in the future exact payment from whoever does not stand by his statement. Just as the people of those generations were not punished by an earthly court, but were subjected to divine punishment, so too, although no earthly court can compel the person who reneged to complete the transaction, punishment will be exacted at the hand of heaven for any damage that he caused. All right? So somebody who takes a deposit, not a bailee's deposit, but a deposit to sell an item, and then somebody else offers him a higher price, and he says, you know what, take your money back. I'm gonna, sell it to this guy who offered me more money, even though he had already agreed to sell it to the first buyer. So legally he can do that, but the one who exacted payment from the generation of the flood and the generation of the dispersion will exact payment from this person. He'll pay a price in the future, though no earthly court will be the one to exact it from him. Rabbi Shimon says anyone who has the money in his possession has the advantage. The sages said it is only with regard to the seller that payment of money does not affect the transaction, so that if the buyer paid for the item and did not yet take possession of the purchased item, the seller can legally renege on the sale and return the money. But by contrast, once the buyer paid for the item, he cannot renege on his decision and demand return of his money, even if he did not yet take possession of the purchased item. So the one who can renege is the seller. The buyer, once he pays the money, and that stands to reason that the seller's not going to be so quick to give the money back, especially in light of that curse. And perhaps even as a legal matter, it's only the seller who can renege. The buyer can't once he has handed over the money. That's Mishnah number 1 here in chapter 4. Now the Gemara. Rebbe would teach Rabbi Shimon his son. When one party takes possession of the gold coins, the other party acquires the silver coins. Right? When we said we're buying gold coins with silver, the silver is the money, the gold is the commodity. So the other part, when one party takes the gold, the other party acquires the silver, consistent with the Mishnah. So Rabbi Shimon said to his father, "My teacher, you taught us in your youth, in the first version of the Mishnah, when one party takes possession of the silver coins, the other party acquires the gold." So apparently Rebbe worded it differently when he was younger. "And do you then teach us in your old age that when one party takes possession of the gold, the other party acquires the silver?" Why did Rebbe change the formulation of the Mishnah? Remember, it was Rebbe who redacted the Mishnah. So why did he change this formulation? So the Gemara asks, in his youth, what did Rebbe hold? And in his maturity, what did he hold? What is the basis for his original opinion and what led him to change his mind? And the Gemara explains, in his youth, he held gold coins, which are more valuable, are the currency, and silver coins, which are relatively not valuable, they are the commodity, i.e. the purchase, what's being purchased with the gold. And the principle is when one takes possession of a commodity of the other party, when one takes possession of a commodity, the other party acquires the currency. But in his old age, he held that silver coins, which circulate in the sense that they are universally accepted by merchants, in contrast to gold coins, which merchants are less willing to accept as payment for inexpensive items because they have to create so much change. So they are the currency. Silver is the currency. Gold coins, which do not circulate, are a commodity. And that certainly makes sense to us today. We don't use gold as a currency. Gold, even if it's in the form of coins, is really something that we purchase to have some security, right? When there's inflation, we buy gold, but we put it away. It's not like we're buying gold in order to go spend gold. It makes sense to us that gold is a commodity and silver is currency. And the principle is that when one party takes possession of the commodity, the other party acquires the currency. And Rav Ashi said, it is reasonable, and I don't know if I mentioned, we're on 44b. Rav Ashi said, it is reasonable to teach the law in accordance with that which he taught in his, Rav Ashi said, it is reasonable to teach the law in accordance with that which he taught in his youth. This is from the fact that the Tana teaches later in the Mishnah, when one party takes possession of the copper, the other party acquires the silver. right? So here saying, well, no, I mean, Rebbe had it right the first time. Gold is more valuable, so we say that gold is the currency and silver is the commodity, and this is consistent with later in the Mishnah when it says that when silver is used to purchase copper, that copper is the commodity and silver is the currency, right? So the more expensive, the more valuable one is considered the currency, and the less valuable one is considered the commodity. And so it would, if we wanted to be consistent with that, in the first clause of the Mishnah, it would have made more sense to say that gold is the currency and silver is the commodity. So Rav Ashi explains, granted, if you say that the silver coins relative to the gold coins are a commodity, well, that is the reason why that the Tana teaches when one party takes possession of the copper, the other party acquires the silver, meaning that copper is the commodity. As even though relative to gold coins, the silver coins are a commodity, relative to copper coins, they would be the currency. But if you say that the silver coins relative to the gold coins are currency, then the subsequent ruling is self-evident. And now, relative to gold coins, which are more valuable than the silver coins, you say that the silver coins are currency. Then, relative to copper coins, as the silver coins are more valuable than the copper coins, and they also circulate more easily, is it necessary for the Mishnah to state that the silver coins are the currency and the copper coins are the commodity? So that's the proof that Rav Ashi is offering, but the Gemara rejects this proof. Even if you teach the law in accordance with the opinion of Rebbe, as he taught it in his old age, it was necessary for the Tana to teach the law of silver and copper coins as well. And this is because it might enter your mind to say that in a place where these copper perutos circulate, they circulate more easily than silver coins. Therefore, say that they are the currency and the silver coins are the commodity. And therefore, the Tana teaches us that since silver coins are universally accepted as currency, and there is a place where copper coins do not circulate, that the copper coins are a commodity. And again, it kind of squares with our lived experience, right? Where if somebody decided to purchase a lot of pennies, and I don't think that's happening anymore, but there was a time when people were purchasing pennies, mass amounts of pennies, because copper was at a place where the value of copper as a metal was greater than the value of a penny. Right? And so people were just buying huge numbers of pennies, I think, and melting them down into copper. Copper wire is something that's often stolen from construction sites, whereas silver is just considered, money, kesef, right? Like silver and money have been synonymous for a long time. I'll just mention in passing that Nina and I took our honeymoon years ago when we were married, and we drove up the coast of California, and a place that we stopped was San Simeon, where, William Randolph Hearst, that, famous, rich collector of stuff, has his famous mansion. And we learned a little bit about the story of William Randolph Hearst. Now, he, if you ever saw Citizen Kane, that was a movie loosely based on Hearst, who was a rich boy that grew up and became, this newspaper tycoon. But he was rich to begin with because of his father. And his father was somebody who came to California in the gold rush, right, looking for gold, and was so fortunate as to find silver. And it was much better for him. Right? A lot of people came looking for gold and found nothing. He found silver, and nobody else was mining silver at the time, so he made this vast fortune in silver. And, spiritually speaking, it so often happens that, you think you know what you need, you plan A, right? And God has other plans for you. And plan B, which seemed to be, second place, silver compared to gold, ends up being much better in retrospect, right? So sometimes you finish second and you realize you're much better off than finishing first. That second really was, the grand prize. You just couldn't see it then. Okay. Let's keep going. Where was I? Okay, so the Gemara comments, and Rabbi Akiva as well holds that gold coins are currency relative to silver. And this is seen from the incident where Rav borrowed gold dinars from the daughter of Rabbi Akiva. Ultimately, the gold dinars appreciated in value. And Rav came before Rabbi Akiva to ask his opinion. And Rav was concerned that by returning more valuable dinars than he borrowed, this would violate the prohibition against paying interest. If right now, like there are gold coins in the world, but they're really just used as a commodity to buy and sell, gold by weight. It's just formed into coins. So if I need some of these gold coins for whatever transaction I'm doing, maybe I live in John Wick world where everybody pays with gold coins. If I say to you, lend me 10 gold coins, right? Like 10 ounces of gold, very valuable. Maybe that's worth $10,000, and I'll pay you back next week. Right? Now, next week, I got the 10 gold coins. I needed them. I used them. I got 10 gold coins to replace them. I'm going to give it back to you. But if you're a Jew and I'm a Jew, we cannot lend to each other and charge interest, right? That's usury. That's prohibited by the Torah. So if you lend me 10 gold coins and I pay you back 10 gold coins, sounds great. You lent me, I paid you back. What interest was there? There's no interest. You gave me 10 gold coins, I gave you 10 gold coins. But if the price of gold was $1,000 an ounce last week and it's, $1,200 an ounce this week, then when I return the gold coins to you, I'm giving you something back that's quite a bit more valuable than what you gave me. And that might be ribis. That might violate the prohibition on usury. And that's what the concern was here. So ultimately, the gold dinars appreciated in value. Rav came before Rabbi Akiva to ask his opinion, and Rav was concerned that by returning more valuable dinars than he borrowed, he would violate the prohibition against paying interest. Rabbi Akiva said to Rav, "Go and pay her unflawed and weighed dinars. Return the number of dinars that you borrowed, as their monetary value is irrelevant." You are returning what you borrowed exactly. And the Gemara asks, well, granted, if you say that gold coins are currency, then this works out well, as he borrowed and repaid the same coins. But if you say that gold coins are a commodity, then this is parallel to the case of one who borrows a sa of produce and repays a sa of produce, but it's a dry measure of produce, and it's the same problem. Give me a bushel of wheat today, I'll give you a bushel of wheat next week, and the price of a bushel of wheat changed in the meantime. The sages prohibit that. And this is prohibited as the price of produce may increase in the interim, and we'll see that on page 75a. Now, the Gemara rejects this proof. The dinars that Rav received from the daughter of Rabbi Akiva did not constitute a standard loan, as Rav had dinars elsewhere, but he needed money immediately. And since he had dinars, it is tantamount to saying to her, lend me money until my son comes or until I find the key. As the Mishna on page 75a teaches, when the borrower possesses the same item that he is borrowing and merely does not have momentary access to it, this type of borrowing and repayment is permitted. Right? In other words, I have plenty of bushels of wheat in my own barn, but right now I don't have the key to my barn. I need to deliver to this buyer. So I'm borrowing a bushel of wheat from my neighbor, and I'm going to pay him a bushel of wheat, but it's not because I have to go earn or farm or harvest that bushel of wheat. I have it. I just can't get at it right now. So this is a loan of convenience, not a business loan, as it were, and that's why it would be permitted. And Rava said, this following Tana also holds that the gold coins are currency, as it is taught in Baraisa, the peruta, which is like a penny, the peruta of which the sages spoke in all places in the Mishnah, is 1/8 of an Italian isser. And the Gemara asks, what is the practical difference that emerges from this calculation? Ostensibly, a peruta is a peruta. And the Gemara explains, its consequences are for the betrothal of a woman with money, which can be effected only with money or an item that is worth at least 1 peruta. And this peruta is assessed by means of the Italian isser. And the Baraisa continues, an isser is 1/24 of a silver dinar. And the Gemara asks, what is the practical difference that emerges from this calculation? And the Gemara answers, its consequences are for buying and selling to establish its value for use in commercial transactions. We need to know what a penny is worth in a particular location. So the Baraisa continues, a silver dinar is 1/25th of a gold dinar. What is the practical difference that emerges from this calculation? And the Gemara explains that its consequences are with regard to redemption of the firstborn son. The father of a firstborn gives the priest 5 sela, which are worth 20 silver dinars. Were he to give the priest a gold dinar, he would receive 5 silver dinars in change. And the Gemara asks, granted, if you say that gold coins are currency, the Tana calculates the value of the coins based on an item whose value is fixed. The value of the gold coin is the currency with fixed value. I'm almost done, by the way. Questions or comments, please get them in now. Relative to which the silver dinar is a commodity whose value fluctuates. But if you say that gold is a commodity, would the Tana calculate the value of a silver coin based on an item that appreciates and depreciates? If the value of gold fluctuates, sometimes the priest returns more than 5 silver dinars to the father who redeemed his son with a gold dinar, and sometimes the father must add to the gold dinar and give this additional sum along with the gold dinar to the priest to complete the sum of 5 sela to perform the ritual of the redemption of the firstborn. And rather learn from it that the Tana holds that the gold coins are currency, and the Gemara affirms, learn from it that this is so. Gold may be currency, but remember, even when you're changing one currency for another, one of the items in that exchange has to be the commodity and the other one has to be the currency, unless both are commodities. But if there's 2 currencies, one assumes the status of commodity and the other one is currency. Looks like I only have one question from Joseph. Is there anything that can reverse the judgment of the heavenly court, like repentance on Yom Kippur? Absolutely. Absolutely. Some things are only judged in the heavenly court, and the heavenly court has access to all of the evidence, as it were, right? So, and especially when we go to judge another person, right, and find them lacking and see a flaw in them, that's what we learned, last week's Torah portion, Tazria, but the discussion continues in this week's Torah portion, Metzora, right, where somebody becomes a Metzora, right, that he has that physical manifestation of a spiritual malady, and that can only be ascertained by the Kohen, right? So a priest has to be brought who is expert in Tsaras, as we've talked about before. And he says, okay, that person has Tsaras or that person does not have Tsaras. And it's not, it's not for the neighbors to say, oh, you have Tsaras. You don't know if your neighbor has Tsaras or not. And there's a lot going on there because the priest knows more than you do. Well, the heavenly court knows infinitely more than any human knows. And so it's the heavenly court's job to judge. Sometimes there's an earthly court that has, that needs to pass judgment. But then it's the role of the earthly court. It is not our job to judge others because we're missing so much of the information. The heavenly court has all of the information. So absolutely, all of us are sinners, right? All of us have committed many transgressions in our lives, and we do our best to atone for them, whether by Yom Kippur or asking for forgiveness or making amends, all the different things that we do. And also they're balanced out by all the mitzvahs that we do, right? So mitzvah doesn't mean good deed, right? Mitzvah means a commandment from God that we fulfill. Now, everything that God commands us to do is good. So whenever we fulfill God's commandments, we're adding to the positive side of our ledger. So yes, of course, there's hope if we've done something wrong. And remember that there's so many things we've done wrong that we don't even know we did them wrong. And that's why it's so important for us to do more. That's not the reason. There's a million reasons why it's important for us to do more mitzvahs, but that's a really big one. And Joseph also says, so basically they were discussing the gold standard. Yeah, in essence, yeah. And it's very interesting, right? At the end of that discussion, they're talking about, well, what is the item whose value never fluctuates? And so that's what you're saying, right? The gold standard. But the value does fluctuate because every value fluctuates, but they needed to have some kind of standards so that they would know, right, when they need a specific amount of money for a ritual like Pidyon Haben, right, the redemption of the firstborn, that's always going to be with a certain number of coins, right? Because that's specified in the Torah. Well, what does that mean when we don't actually use those coins anymore? When we use other coins in our lives, how do we assign what that, I mean, it's a symbolic redemption, but which coins are going to be used? And that's what they were talking about. That's what I've got for us tonight. And with God's help, we'll be together again tomorrow at the regular time, Sunday, 6 p.m. Pacific. May we hear only good news coming from Israel, which was under attack today. Also a reminder that this week, Monday through Thursday, we're going to probably, as of now, the schedule is 7:30 p.m. each day Pacific, which will be 90 minutes later than normal. And that's because this week we are sound mixing our movie Guns and Moses, and the studio hours are like that. That's what I've got for us today. Have a good night. Good Vach, Shavua Tov.